Hey guys, tonight we crack open a forgotten footnote in a sea of bagats and baguettes, where something almost scandalous happens. A man dares to ask God for more. The wind is dry against your neck, the sky a low-hanging vault of stars. The air smells like ancient leather and fig leaves, and somewhere behind you a camel coughs judgmentally. Your feet ache from walking through the wilderness of First Chronicles, a book that reads like someone dictated their family tree mid-sneeze. But suddenly, the roll call halts. The story presses pause, because you're standing in the shadow of a name carved from pain. Jabez. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and your local time in the comments. I always love seeing who's listening from where. Whether you're in downtown Dallas or a cabin in Iceland, you're in good company. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your name means sorrow, not like melancholy or wistful jazz on a rainy evening sorrow. Literal full-volume pain. Your mom names you that because she had a hard labor. Thanks, Mom. Every time someone calls your name, it's a reminder you caused suffering, and you've been dragging that shadow behind you like a busted sandal ever since. But tonight you throw your name back at the sky, yea, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory, that your hand would be with me, and that you would keep me from evil, so I don't cause pain. 4 petitions, 1 little verse. Theological dynamite tucked between tribal rosters. You say it quietly, like maybe God will ignore the boldness of it, but secretly you're hoping he won't. The first bit? Bless me indeed. You don't just want general favor, you want the capital B blessing. Hebrew grammar here punches the word. Double emphasis, as if saying bless me and like really mean it. No guilt, no qualifiers, you're not bargaining, you're not promising to start a nonprofit, you just want the divine faucet turned on full blast. Then, enlarge my territory. In an age where land equals power, legacy, survival, you're not whispering for an extra vineyard. You're asking to be a steward of more. More space, more souls, more weight. It's not about real estate. It's about capacity. About becoming the kind of person who doesn't flinch when the map expands. You've read about Abraham, Moses, the big spiritual hitters. But here's the twist. Jabez isn't one of them. He has no burning bush, no staff, no golden resume, just this one holy outburst. Historians still argue whether his story was inserted late into the Chronicles for emphasis or to keep people awake during the genealogies. Either way, it worked. His prayer breaks the monotony like a sax solo in a Gregorian chant. Now you're praying it too. Part 3. Let your hand be with me. This is a callback, subtle but potent. The phrase hand of God in the Old Testament isn't about God holding yours in some Pinteresty way. It's shorthand for power, favor, deliverance. You don't just want blessing, you want guidance inside the blessing. Like downloading a navigation app for the riches you just requested, because you've seen people implode under the weight of success. Ancient Israel had kings who crumbled like stale pita the moment they stopped checking in with the source. Finally, the curveball. Keep me from evil so I don't cause pain. You're asking not just to be protected from harm, but to stop perpetuating it. You know your name is pain. You're not trying to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're saying, rewrite this story. Imagine being that self-aware in the Bronze Age. This guy had no therapy, no Instagram reels telling him to break generational trauma, and yet here he is praying not to pass it on. This is the kind of honesty you don't get in a lot of ancient prayers. Most are like, smite my enemies, or help me win this battle. Jabez's prayer is interior. It's introspective. The rabbis called this the prayer that moved the fence posts of heaven. Fringe scholars even suggest it became a secret code among early mystics, like spiritual Morse code for those wanting to slip through the cracks of fate. And then, just as abruptly as he appeared, he's gone. But you feel different now. Something in your chest unclenches. Something in the ground beneath your feet exhales. You look up. The stars haven't changed, but maybe you have. Just a little. like a seam loosened in the fabric of your soul. Remember, this guy had one verse, one prayer. He never led a nation, never built a temple, never fought a lion, but he asked boldly, and that made the cut. You keep walking. The road feels wider. Maybe your territory just expanded. You keep walking, but the path is softer now. Less like trudging and more like floating. Still, the sky hasn't spoken. No thunder, no confirmation. You glance up, half expecting a flaming scroll to descend, but nothing happens. And yet, somehow everything is happening. And then, up ahead, there's a woman at the temple gates. She's kneeling, rocking slightly, lips moving without sound. Her hands tremble in her lap like they're not used to being empty. You stop a few paces back, not out of politeness, but reverence, because this prayer, it's so raw it could melt steel. It's Hannah. You shift your weight. She hasn't noticed you, hasn't noticed anything, really. Her world has shrunk to one small ache, a womb echoing with silence. You see, in her culture, infertility isn't just private grief, it's public shame. Everyone knows. The other wife has kids, plural, and no filter. And Peninnah, with all the subtlety of a clanging bell, reminds Hannah daily. There's no hiding from it. In a time when women's worth was measured in offspring and olives, Hannah feels like a drought in human form. So she goes to Shiloh. Not Jerusalem, Shiloh. This was before the temple got its glow up. Back then it was more like a holy tent city, still sacred, still watched over by a priest who, you'll see, is about as spiritually alert as a sleepy goat. She pours herself out in prayer. No scripted words, no poetic structure, just grief, distilled and whispered straight from her diaphragm. She promises God that if he gives her a son, she'll give him back. That's not metaphor. She means literally dedicate the boy to the Lord's service, probably under the watch of Eli, the aforementioned sleepy goat priest. Historians still argue whether this kind of vow was common or radical, but Hannah's version, it's desperate and dazzling in equal measure. And then Eli waddles over. Now Eli's vision is going, literally and spiritually. He watches her, sees her lips moving, but hears nothing, and jumps to the most logical conclusion. She's drunk. You can't make this up. Woman sobbing in the temple? Must be schnockered. Eli confronts her in what has to be one of the top 10 worst pastoral moves of all time. Put away your wine, he scolds. And Hannah, get this, doesn't back down. Through the haze of her devastation, she still finds the dignity to say, no, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have poured out my soul before the Lord. You can almost hear the scratch of Eli rewinding internally, trying to save face. He quickly blesses her. Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant your petition. Doesn't promise it, doesn't inquire what the petition is, just tosses out a prayer like you'd toss crumbs to pigeons. But here's the kicker. She accepts it. That's faith. She goes home, and her countenance, the text says, is no longer sad. Even before her womb says yes, her soul already has. A quirky little detail. The Hebrew root of Hannah's name means grace or favor. It's like her name was a seed waiting for rain, and when it finally falls, her whole being stretches upward. Soon enough, Samuel is born, a prophet, a kingmaker, the guy who'll anoint David, who'll change Israel's future, all because his mother prayed in silence so fierce it was mistaken for drunkenness. You keep thinking about that, how some of the loudest prayers never make a sound, how some of the most powerful moves of heaven begin with someone breaking quietly. And you wonder, have you ever prayed like that? No filter, no phrasing, no exit strategy. Just laid it all down like a bet you can't afford to lose? Sometimes you think prayer needs to be grand, that it needs organs and incense in a three-point structure. But Hannah teaches you that sometimes it just needs pain, pointed heavenward. There's an old Talmudic rumor, probably invented by some overly poetic rabbi, that the tears of righteous women fall directly into the hands of angels. Not the men, not the kings or priests, the women. Fringe theology? Sure, but oddly comforting. And here's something else. Hannah didn't ask to be famous. She didn't ask for a miracle for the miracle's sake. She asked for a child because she had love pent up inside her like trapped sunlight. She didn't want to be pitied. She wanted to participate in God's story. There's this line she says later, after Samuel's born, and she dedicates him, "My heart rejoices in the Lord, my horn is exalted." It's part of a whole prayer that sounds suspiciously like a prototype for Mary's Magnificat. Scholars still debate whether Luke modeled Mary's song on Hannah's or if it was just the Spirit running a remix. Either way, you realize prayers echo across time. One mother's praise can ripple forward 1,000 years to the lips of another. You crouch near the temple wall, the wind changes. Maybe someone else is praying nearby now. Someone with lips pressed together and eyes turned red, and you feel it again. That sense that prayers, like stars, may seem silent, but they're still burning. Your eyes close involuntarily. You're not asleep, you're just still. And in the hush, you wonder what's been buried so deep inside you that it's never made it past your ribs. Maybe tonight's the night it comes loose. So you whisper nothing and everything, and the temple holds its breath. You're still kneeling somewhere in that hushed temple haze when the air around you changes again. Thickens, almost, like breath held in a dream. You blink and the scenery bends. Gone are the dusty temple walls. Now you're beneath open skies, and the stars above are holding their breath right alongside you. Your fingers trail over rough fabric, animal skin maybe, laid out on stone. There's incense smoke curling into the air like a question mark, and nearby, a young man lies still. He's not dead, just asleep. This is Solomon. You feel it in your chest before you understand it. Something holy is about to happen. You see, Solomon is at Gibeon. Back before the temple was built, this high place acted like a temporary divine hangout spot. It wasn't the permanent home of the ark, but it was close enough, kind of like crashing at a friend's guest house when your real place is under construction. And here's the wild thing. Solomon has just inherited the throne from David, his dad, the harp-slinging warrior poet. And instead of building a war chest or assembling spies or marrying yet another politically strategic wife, Solomon decides to pray, but not just anywhere. He goes to Gibeon and offers 1,000 burnt offerings. Like, not metaphorically, literally. Historians still argue whether this number is poetic exaggeration or an actual meat-heavy marathon of devotion. But either way, it's a lot, enough to get heaven's attention. That night, God shows up. And not with plagues or a burning bush. No, this is subtler. A dream. A divine whisper in the REM cycle. You've had dreams before, probably ones where you show up to school wearing no pants or fight a bear made of Legos. But this dream is different. It glows. God says, ask for whatever you want me to give you. Pause. Breathe. The sheer audacity of that offer. No fine print. No trick question. The creator of the universe just opened a blank check and handed over the pen. And Solomon? He doesn't ask for wealth, not revenge, not fame. He asks for wisdom, specifically an understanding heart to govern your people and discern between good and evil. It's not a humble brag. It's genuinely what he wants. The word for understanding in Hebrew can also mean listening. He's not asking to be the smartest guy in the room. He's asking to be the most tuned in. Imagine that. A king who wants better ears, not a bigger army. God is so delighted he basically throws in the jackpot bundle. Since you didn't ask for long life or death to your enemies or a bazillion gold coins, he says, probably in more celestial phrasing, I'll give you all that and the wisdom too. You wonder what you'd ask for in that moment. Be honest. You'd probably panic and request something awkward like a nicer apartment and also my boss to get diarrhea. Solomon, though, he nails it. He asks for the thing that makes all other things manageable. And here's a fringe fact for you. Some scholars speculate Solomon was around 20 years old when this happened, barely out of adolescence, already shaping the fate of a nation. That puts your quarter-life crisis in a slightly different light, doesn't it? Now here's the twist. The prayer happens in a dream, but the effects are real. You wake up from those wish fulfillment dreams and shrug them off. But Solomon? He wakes up and changes everything. He returns to Jerusalem and immediately hosts a feast, a worship session, and kicks off a reign that would include building the actual temple. Like the temple. Gold-covered everything. Angels embroidered into the curtain. Interior designed by cherubim. And remember that whole wisdom thing? It doesn't stay abstract. It kicks in fast. Next thing you know, he's arbitrating between two women fighting over a baby. You know the story, one baby, two grieving mothers, both claiming him. Solomon's solution? Threaten to divide the child, see who flinches. Terrifying tactic. Brilliant insight. The real mother reveals herself not by her words, but by her self-sacrifice. And boom, Solomon's reputation is sealed. Historians still debate how much of Solomon's actual writings survived, and whether he personally penned Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, or had an elite team of ghostwriters. But the prayer is original. It's the seed that grew everything. You think about what wisdom looks like today, not cleverness, not having a hot take on every debate, but deep, slow, listening wisdom, the kind that doesn't always need to be right, just true. You stretch out your hands and try the prayer yourself. Give me a heart that listens, not a brain that dominates, not a mouth that wins, just a heart that listens. To people, to gum, to the silences in between. The moon slips behind a cloud. A cool wind brushes your cheek like a benediction. And for a fleeting moment, the world feels a little clearer, like the fuzziness got turned down a notch. Your own inner noise, quieter. You don't need 1,000 offerings, just this moment. This one strange, lucid prayer drifting up from your chest like incense. And maybe, just maybe, heaven leans closer when it hears you ask for the one thing that helps you hear it better. You exhale slow and deep, like your lungs have finally decided to cooperate. There's something settling in your bones now, an awareness that prayer doesn't always wear robes or echo in marble halls. Sometimes it's just a sigh with intention, a sacred mutter, a mental finger raised toward heaven like, hey, I'm still here. But then the air shifts again. The light dims like twilight pressed into amber, and suddenly you're underground. Stone walls, damp and narrow, moss on your elbows. It smells like sweat and soil and a little bit like the leftovers of fear. You're in a kite, and the guy next to you? He's gripping a harp. This is David, yes, that David. The Goliath-slaying, bear-wrestling, anointed but not yet crowned shepherd boy turned outlaw. And he's praying through music. Except this isn't the sanitized worship set David. This is the hunted version. The one dodging spears, hiding from King Saul, trying to stay alive with 400 angry misfits who mostly smell like regret. You sit beside him in the shadows, and he doesn't even look up as his fingers pluck a quiet chord. The cave amplifies everything. The rustle of wool, the drip of distant water, your heartbeat. And then he begins to pray. Not with eyes closed or hands folded, but with lyrics. Psalms, raw, broken, sometimes sarcastic songs that start with, God, where are you? And end with, okay, fine, I trust you anyway. Take Psalm 57, probably written in a cave just like this. He starts with, have mercy on me, O God, have mercy. Doubled for effect, doubled because when life is that bad, once is never enough. He's not pretending. He talks about enemies like lions, their teeth like spears and arrows. Not metaphorical ones. These are real people with real weapons and real orders to kill him. But he doesn't end in fear. The prayer turns. It pivots. My heart is steadfast, O God. I will sing. You're blinking at that. Sing, here, now. Historians still argue whether David wrote this alone or if it was shouted into the cave's acoustics for others to join, but you can almost imagine it. A handful of exiled, rough-edged rebels mumbling harmonies in candlelight. You shift on the rock floor and think of all the cave seasons you've had. Times when everything above ground was hunting you. Stress, illness, betrayal, the algorithm. And in those moments, did you pray like this? Not polished, not filtered, just full volume, heart laid bare prayers. David teaches you that prayer doesn't need to be tidy. It can be weird, wild, petty even. He yells, he complains. In Psalm 13, he opens with, how long, O Lord? 4 times, 4. Because apparently repetition is holy when you're spiraling. A quirky detail for you, some scholars believe certain psalms contain acrostics, where the first letter of each line follows the Hebrew alphabet. Like even when David's falling apart, his poetry's organized. That's a mental image you can't unsee. Ugly crying into a scroll, but still hitting all your rhymes. And then there's Psalm 51, written after his darkest moral crash. You remember the Bathsheba mess, the murder cover-up, the guilt so thick it practically drips off the parchment. Create in me a clean heart, O God. He doesn't say fix it. He says create, as in I need a whole new model, mine's defective. That level of vulnerability? Rare, even in ancient texts. And here's the thing, God never seems shocked by David's emotional mess. He never says, tone it down. He seems to prefer it, even. Like David's honesty is an aroma he can't resist. You think about your own prayers, how often you censor them, how often you flatten the edges, dress them up for divine company. David didn't do that. He brought his worst to the altar, not his best. That's where intimacy begins. And yet, this is the same David who danced before the ark like nobody was watching, except everyone was watching, and he did it anyway. Scholars still debate whether that dance was indecent or just exuberant, but the guy didn't hold back. When he prayed, anguish, danced, repented, he meant it. That's what makes his psalms so addictive. They're not moral instruction manuals, they're emotional survival guides. You can open them at your lowest and find someone else already crying there, already raging, already praising through gritted teeth. You glance over at him again. His eyes are closed now. Not asleep, just somewhere else. Maybe still with God. Maybe with the sheep he used to guard. Maybe with the crown that isn't yet his, but already weighs heavy in his mind. The cave breathes with you. It's the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels full, like even the shadows are listening. And slowly your heart starts to spill, not in polished words, but in a messy, echoing groan. You think, maybe that's enough. Maybe that's always been enough. You don't have to climb out of the cave to be heard. Sometimes you just have to whisper within it. The cave closes behind you like a sigh, but you don't feel trapped anymore. If anything, you feel louder. Even if no one else heard your psalm, heaven did, and that's something. But now your sandals crunch dry gravel, and suddenly you're higher up, like your soul took an elevator to a more precarious altitude. You're standing on Mount Carmel, and the air is electric. No, really, it smells like ozone and expectation. Somewhere behind you, 450 prophets of Baal are sweating through their matching ceremonial robes, and you're watching Elijah stretch his back like he's about to embarrass an entire religion. The showdown is iconic. Ahab, the king with a spine made of cooked noodles, has sold his soul to political expediency and Jezebel's gods. Baal worship is rampant. God's people are lost in a spiritual fog of compromise and convenience. So Elijah, this wild-haired prophet with no chill, throws down the ultimate gauntlet. One altar, 2 bulls, no fire. Whichever God lights up, the sacrifice wins. You stand on the sound, the tension curling like steam through your ribs. The prophets of Baal go first. They chant, they shout, they dance in awkward circles, cutting themselves with ritual knives. They're sweating so hard their eyeliner is running. Still nothing. And Elijah, oh, he mocks, gently, then less gently. Maybe your God is sleeping or relieving himself. Yes, he actually says that. Hebrew scholars still debate whether the phrasing is literal or poetic, but either way, it's peak spiritual sarcasm. Then when the frenzy dies, Elijah steps forward, and here's where it gets theatrical. He rebuilds a neglected altar with 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel. Then he digs a trench, drenches the sacrifice with water. Not once, not twice, 3 times. It's overkill. It's ridiculous. It's brilliant. Because when you're calling fire from the sky, you don't want it to look like a parlor trick. You want it to be unmistakable. Then the prayer. Simple, clear, no shouting. Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant. Answer me, Lord, so these people will know that you are turning their hearts back again. And then, boom, fire falls like judgment, wrapped in light. It doesn't just ignite the wood. It consumes the stones, the water, the dust. Even the trench gets slurped up like a divine straw. The crowd falls flat. There's no doubting who won. Baal is silent. Yahweh is not. You shiver. Not from cold, but from that post-miracle tremble that settles in your knees. Elijah's prayer wasn't long. It wasn't pretty. It was focused, strategic. One part reverence, two parts reminder. He's not asking for personal vengeance. He's asking for revelation. There's a quirky debate among historians about whether Mount Carmel was considered a neutral zone, a kind of spiritual Switzerland, because of its height and position. But after today, not neutral anymore. You think about how many of your own prayers are padded with just, and if you want to, and maybe if you're not too busy. Elijah didn't do that. He prayed like God would, not like God might. And it worked. But the story doesn't stop there. After the fire, after the victory, Elijah goes up the mountain again. He squats down, face between his knees, classic prophetic yoga pose, and prays for rain. Because did you forget? It hasn't rained in years. Elijah was the one who declared the drought. Now it's time to reverse it. He sends his servant to check the horizon. Nothing. Prays again, sends him again, 7 times, until finally the servant sees it. A cloud as small as a man's hand. That's the signal. That's all it takes. And here's where you catch something sneaky beautiful. Elijah calls fire with 1 prayer. But rain, that takes 7. Maybe it's not about difficulty. Maybe it's about timing. Fire is dramatic. Rain is restorative. And sometimes the gentle gifts take longer to reach the earth. You think about that, about how the urgent prayers get the heat and lightning, but the slow, aching ones, the ones for healing, for change, for growth, they take rounds. They take persistence, maybe even sweat. The New Testament later calls Elijah a man just like us, which is hilarious because you've never called down atmospheric fire or outrun a chariot. But still, the point stands. His power wasn't in the spectacle. It was in the prayer. You lean back and look at the sky. It's darker now, cloud thick and bruised. You remember the altar. You remember the soaked wood. You remember the hand-sized cloud. And you whisper, half to yourself, half to heaven, let it fall. Because sometimes faith isn't screaming into the void. Sometimes it's drenching your own miracle in water just to make sure no one can deny who set it ablaze. You wipe the soot from your hands, whether from fire or prayer. Who can say? And descend from the mountain into quiet shadows. The air is cooler here, softer. The smell of scorched sacrifice gives way to olive groves and the distant hum of life resuming. And then you're in a chamber. Not royal, not ornate, just clean and dim, with the stillness that only comes when someone's been weeping for a while and finally stopped. You feel it in your lungs, like the oxygen itself is grieving. In the corner, a king lies on his bed, turned to face the wall. Not the door, not the prophet, just the wall. It's as if looking away from everyone is the only way to be fully honest. This is Hezekiah. He's just received the kind of news no one wants. Terminal diagnosis, delivered prophetically. Isaiah walked in, said, "Set your house in order," and basically handed him a death certificate. And what does Hezekiah do? He doesn't shout, doesn't sprint for a second opinion. He turns his face to the wall and prays. Simple words, unfiltered, like a child caught in trouble and too tired to lie. Remember me, Lord. I've walked before you faithfully. I've done what's good. It's not a resume, it's a plea. And then he weeps, openly, bitterly. The ancient text calls them bitter tears, which sounds like something brewed for curses, not comfort. But apparently they do the job. Because before Isaiah even gets out of the palace, God tells him, "Go back. I've heard his prayer. I've seen his tears. I'll add 15 years to his life." You blink. That's it? One prayer, one turn of the face. 15 extra years. Some scholars argue whether this story was edited in later, as a dramatic flourish in Hezekiah's legacy. Others believe it's one of the rare Old Testament moments where prayer directly rewrites a death sentence. But regardless of the editorial process, what's undeniable is this: God responds, not to fanfare, not to fasting, but to a man on his bed, whispering into the plaster. There's a quirky Jewish tradition that Hezekiah composed a song of healing afterward, kind of like a musical thank you note. You imagine it being awkwardly sung with a still scratchy throat, like someone serenading their doctor post-surgery. But that's Hezekiah. Practical, devout, unpolished. Earlier in his reign, he tore down pagan altars, fortified Jerusalem, and basically became Judah's spiritual contractor. He's not flashy, he's faithful. And maybe that's why his prayer hits so hard. Because he's not a prophet, not a psalmist, not even particularly poetic. He's just a man with too little time, begging for more. You think about that a lot, how often we pray big prayers when we've got nothing left to lose. How many times you've bargained in hospital hallways, airplane bathrooms, dim kitchen corners at 3 a.m., when the clock ticks just a little too loud, and you remember your own wall moments, the ones where no one's watching. No spotlight, no Instagrammable faith quote, just you whispering into darkness, asking for time. Sometimes the wall is literal. Sometimes it's metaphorical, a boundary, a ceiling, a diagnosis. But the posture is the same, turned away from noise, turned inward, turned upward. And here's the beautiful, terrifying truth. God heard him, not just tolerated, heard, like adjusted history kind of hearing. You wonder what would happen if you started believing that again, that your tears weren't just chemistry, but communication. You take a deep breath, and behind your eyelids, a memory stirs. That time you whispered please with no noun attached. That time your prayer was just a saw into the couch cushions. That time you said nothing but meant everything. Maybe those were your Hezekiah prayers. You turn your face toward your own wall now. It doesn't matter if it's paint or stone or memory, and you pray. It's not impressive, it's not articulate, but it's yours. God, please, just remember me. And in the silence that follows, you don't hear an answer, but something loosens, and you get the strangest sense. 15 years or 15 seconds, you've just been heard. Your hands are trembling again, but not from fear this time. It's something else, something older, something deeper. You're not sure if you've descended further or been swallowed whole, but now the light is greenish, dim, and moving like waves on the ceiling. And yes, your nose confirms it before your brain does. Fish, salt, slime, and slow digestion. You're in a belly, technically a belly within a belly, a man inside a fish inside the sea. Jonah. It's damp, claustrophobic. It smells like the worst sushi you've never eaten. The walls pulse. Your breath fogs in the stale air. And somewhere, very faintly, a heartbeat thuds. Whether yours or the fish's, you're not sure. Jonah's prayer starts here. Not from a mountaintop, not from a palace, from a stomach. And to be clear, he didn't get here by accident. Jonah ran. God said, go to Nineveh. Jonah said, cool, cool, cool. So I'm going to book it in the opposite direction. He boards a ship to Tarshish, a city so west, it might as well be labeled far away from obedience. Then the storm, then the lot casting, then the splash. You remember the moment when Jonah tells the sailors to throw him overboard, not as a hero, more like, fine, end me. He's not repentant, he's done. But God sends a fish, not as punishment, as preservation. Swallowed, suspended, still, and then he prays. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. That's how the chapter opens. Not with a scream, not with immediate regret. It takes time, days even. Scholars still argue whether Jonah began praying the moment he was swallowed or only after marinating for 3 days in gastric regret. But eventually the words come. I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. The prayer is weirdly poetic. Jonah, the runaway prophet, suddenly starts quoting Psalms like he's auditioning for a temple choir. The deep surrounded me. Seaweed wrapped around my head. All vivid, all dramatic, all deeply Jonah. He's not just asking to be saved. He's owning the fact that he sank. And not just into the sea, but into rebellion. Into himself. There's something quirky here, though. Jonah never actually says the word sorry. He gets close. Hints at it, but mostly he just acknowledges how far he fell and how God pulled him out. And guess what? That's enough. The fish vomits him onto dry land, literally. The Bible doesn't sugarcoat it. Jonah isn't gently placed on the shore like some divine Uber drop-off. He's spit out, covered in who knows what, but alive. You sit there with him for a moment on the sand, both of you smelling like second chances. He's blinking against the sunlight like someone who hasn't seen grace in a while. And you ask yourself, why do we always wait until we're inside the fish? Why do we hold out until we've been tossed overboard, digested and humbled? You've had fish belly moments, haven't you? The job loss, the breakup, the panic attack in aisle 7. You didn't plan to pray. You weren't ready to pray. You just had to. And suddenly your mouth found words you hadn't used since your last spiritual meltdown. There's a Hebrew word in Jonah's prayer, Sheol. It's the underworld, the place of the dead. Jonah says, out of the belly of Sheol I cried. That's not just location, it's condition. He's saying, I was as good as dead, and you heard me. That's what gets you. God doesn't wait for Jonah to become spiritually polished. He hears him in the stink and stew of his own failure. You think of how many times you've disqualified yourself, said, not now, God, I'm a mess. But Jonah proves something uncomfortably freeing. Sometimes your mess is the microphone. And here's a fringe tidbit for you. Early Christian art loved Jonah, like obsessed. For centuries, he symbolized resurrection. He's painted on catacomb walls, curled in fish bellies with halos, because 3 days in darkness, then back to life. Sound familiar? Jesus himself later says, the sign of Jonah is what people should expect from him. 3 days in the tomb, then out. It's not just history, it's prophecy. You look at Jonah again. He's still damp, still reluctant, still Jonah. And you realize prayer doesn't fix character overnight. It opens a door. You whisper something halfway between apology and surrender. It tastes bitter at first, then sweet. And in the quiet of your own fish belly moment, you realize God doesn't need you to smell good. Just speak. Even if it's a little late. Even if it sounds like a psalm written on a bar napkin. Even if it comes from the deepest place you've ever sunk. Because that's where resurrection always begins. The fishy tang fades, slowly, gratefully. And now the air smells like dust and lavender and burned scrolls. You're indoors again, sort of. Stone walls, open windows, moonlight spilling across a woven rug that's been flattened by ritual. You hear the faintest scrape of wood and cloth as someone kneels down. Again. This is Daniel. He's older now, not the lion-fighting teen from Sunday school posters. His beard's gone silver. His spine has a soft hunch, not from defeat, but from years of bowing and prayer. 3 times a day, same window, same city, same routine. You shift your gaze and see it, the window facing Jerusalem. Not the actual city, mind you. It's been a smoking ruin for decades. But this isn't about what's visible. It's about what's remembered. Daniel prays toward home. Even if home is rubble, you lean against the wall as he whispers his prayer. He's not dramatic. He's not trying to be heard. He's not angling for attention. He's just doing what he's always done, what he refused to stop doing, even when it became illegal. Because here's the backdrop. Jealous officials convinced King Darius to pass a law that no one could pray to anyone but the king for 30 days. That's right, state-sponsored blasphemy with a built-in expiration date. And Daniel, he doesn't protest, doesn't debate, doesn't tweet about it. He opens the window and kneels. Historians still argue whether the open window was symbolic defiance or just habit, but either way, it's bold. It's not about showing off. It's about staying aligned with a God whose city has burned, whose temple is gone, whose people are scattered. You mouth his words along with him as best you can. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe. It's not a desperate prayer. It's a rooted one, anchored, calm, the kind of prayer that grows from a daily practice, not a sudden panic. And of course, you know what happens next. They catch him, they report him, and the king, caught in his own ego trap, has to throw Daniel into the lion's den. You pause here, because honestly, this part never gets less insane. Actual lions, actual death sentence. Because of a prayer, the den is stone cold, literally. The smell is a mix of fur, damp, and very old bones. You step back instinctively. Somewhere in the dark, something yawns. The lions are real. The danger is real. But Daniel? He prays again. Not loudly, not with panic. He's not asking for a miracle. He's simply continuing a conversation that never stopped. A fringe rabbinic tradition says that the lions were muzzled by an angel who stood guard all night, arms crossed, unimpressed. And one weird medieval manuscript even depicts Daniel using a lion as a pillow. Scholars roll their eyes at that one, but still, the imagery sticks. You watch him rest, not in ignorance, in trust. Prayer does that. It builds spiritual reflex. So when pressure hits, your instinct isn't to perform. It's to persist. You think back to all the times you've let fear close your windows, all the silent edits you've made to your own prayers, all the hesitations, the substitutions. God help me becomes God maybe if you have time. Daniel never does that, even in exile, under threat, in danger. He kneels. You take another look at the lions. They're still pacing, still dangerous, but powerless, because one man prayed. And what's wild? This wasn't a miracle moment for Daniel. He didn't expect deliverance. He wasn't angling for survival. He prayed knowing he might die anyway. You whisper something to the window, something you haven't said in a while. God, make me consistent, me. Because let's face it, you're good at crisis prayers, at foxhole theology, but the Daniel kind, the quiet, everyday, anyway prayers, that's the real stretch. You imagine what it takes to keep showing up to a ruined city with your heart wide open. To face it, love it, long for it, even when the windows let in more fear than hope. Maybe that's the secret. Keep your windows open. Even when exile feels endless, even when kings are watching, even when the lions are real. Because maybe prayer isn't about escape. Maybe it's about endurance. And the kind of presence that makes lions yawn instead of roar. The stone floor dissolves beneath you, and now it's olive trees, twisted trunks, silver leaves trembling in the wind, the scent of night, wet earth, crushed herbs, and something faintly metallic hangs in the air like a held breath. The sky is swollen with silence. Even the stars seem reluctant to watch. You are in Gethsemane, and not alone. Just a few feet away, Jesus kneels, alone in a circle of moonlight, sweat clinging to his forehead like dew. His friends are asleep, again. You can hear Peter's light snoring. James has curled against a tree like a tired child. And John? Well, John's trying, but he's lost to sleep too. Jesus, he's praying, and not like the Lord's Prayer, not like a gentle, echoey, Our Father moment. This is raw, ripped open, the kind of prayer that makes the angels pause mid-wing beat. You hear him whisper it, broken, honest. Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. The words hit you harder than expected, because you know what's coming. The betrayal, the trial, the nails, and so does he. Yet he still prays, not as I will, but as you will. It's not submission wrapped in serenity. It's agony wrapped in love. You take a breath. The gospel writers say he sweats blood. Hematidrosis, the doctors call it. A stress response so intense, capillaries rupture. Historians still argue whether Luke added that detail to emphasize divinity or medical realism. But the result is the same. Jesus is collapsing under the future and still choosing it. This is the most human prayer in the Bible. Not a king asking for power, not a prophet calling fire, just a son asking for another way, but saying yes even when none comes. You feel it now in your gut, the weight of obedience that doesn't feel good, the ache of surrender with no guarantee of relief. And Jesus doesn't hide from it. He brings it to God with all its mess, all its terror. He prays it again and again, 3 times the same words. You remember that moment from earlier, Elijah praying 7 times for rain. Jesus doesn't need repetition for God's sake. He needs it for his own trembling flesh. Even he circles the same plea, hoping something will change. It doesn't. And he still says yes. That's the part that undoes you, because you've prayed your will be done before. But mostly as a kind of fallback. A plan B in case your first request doesn't get approved. Jesus means it. He means it with his bones. There's a fringe detail buried in one of the Gospels that an angel appears to strengthen him, not to change the outcome, just to help him survive the surrender. You think about that, how sometimes all you get is strength to go through, not a detour around. And you wonder, what if prayer isn't about changing the plan? What if it's about changing posture? About kneeling, even when the ground is cold and the answer is no? Jesus rises, slowly, wipes his face with the sleeve of his robe. The blood still clings. His hands tremble slightly as he walks back to his friends, who are still sleeping, by the way. He doesn't yell. He doesn't sigh. He just says, "Rise, let us go. My betrayer is coming." You follow, not because you're brave, but because how do you walk away from someone who just surrendered everything and still stood up? The olive trees watch you pass. You glance back once, and you swear they remember. That somewhere deep in their roots, they hold this prayer, the one that saved the world by refusing to save itself. You want to whisper something, some kind of tribute, some echo of what he said. But all that comes out is, your will, not mine. And for the first time, you mean it. The olive grove fades behind you like breath on a mirror, and now, you're somewhere higher. Not heavenly, but close, elevated, stark, wind-scrubbed. You feel the rough grain of wood beneath your hand, and your stomach turns even before your mind can label what you're touching. You're at a crucifixion. Not the crucifixion, but beside it. 3 crosses, 1 savior, 2 thieves. You shift uneasily, the sky overhead heavy with judgment and dust. The crowd has thinned. The mockers have gotten tired. But the agony hasn't left. It's still here, thick in the air like humidity. The kind that chokes your throat before you even speak. You look to your left. One of the thieves is still cursing, his voice cracked and bitter. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other turns his head, slowly, painfully. His eyes meet Jesus's, and something softens in his face. Not peace exactly, more like surrender wearing bandages. "Jesus," he says, "remember me when you come into your kingdom." That's it. No theology, no altar call, no doctrinal checklist, just remember me. And Jesus, blood in his mouth, thorns digging into his brow, whispers back, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." You grip the edge of the crossbeam in front of you and let that land. This man's prayer, a dying breath from a convicted criminal, becomes the final recorded conversion before the resurrection. Historians still argue whether the thief had prior exposure to Jesus' ministry or whether this moment was born purely from divine recognition. Either way, the timing is absurd. He's hours from death, maybe minutes, and yet it's enough. That stuns you, because if that prayer is enough, barely whispered, uttered in defeat, with 0 bargaining chips, what does that mean for yours? You close your eyes. You've been in the cave. You've stood in the fire. You've wept against the wall. You've sung from the fish belly. But this is different. This is the prayer from a man who knows there is absolutely no time left to get it right. And so he doesn't even try. He just reaches out. And Jesus reaches back. That's the part that twists inside you. That even here on a cross crushed by the weight of all the world's sin, Jesus still listens, still forgives, still offers hope to someone who quite literally can do nothing in return. No future, no tithe, no ministry, no time, just paradise. You think of all the times you have hesitated to pray because you didn't feel ready. Not clean enough, not worthy enough, not holy enough. But here hangs a man whose hands are nailed down and still, his heart stretches toward the only one who can carry him beyond this moment. And heaven answers. You hear it like wind through a cracked door. Paradise. Not someday, not when you're better, not if you make amends. Today. There's a quirky note tucked into an old Orthodox homily that the thief was the first to see Jesus in glory, that as the stone rolled away and light pierced death itself, he was already there, grinning through the gates like someone who barely made the bus and still got front row seats. You kind of love that. The thief, nameless, broken, unqualified, is first. Because grace doesn't work on points, it works on proximity. You look at Jesus, he's fading now. Not because of weakness, but because the curtain's about to rip, the sky's about to go dark, the earth's about to quake, and still he makes room. One more soul beside him, one more voice he promises forever to. You lean against the cross, not out of guilt, but gratitude. Because if he can be remembered, you can too. You whisper it into the dust and blood and silence, remember me to him. And somewhere beyond the torn veil, you sense a whisper back. I already do. The air softens now. The noise fades. The harsh edges of wood and stone and sky begin to smooth, like waves slowly erasing footprints in the sand. You're still here, but lighter, quieter. Not empty, just held. The prayers you followed tonight. They weren't all neat. They weren't polished or well-timed. Some were whispered in caves. Others sobbed into temple walls. One came from a belly, another from a cross. But every single one of them was heard, and so is yours. That quiet ache in your chest, he hears that. The sigh you gave without words, staring at your ceiling fan, he hears that too. Not one cry from the deep goes unanswered. Not one turning face goes unseen. Not one kneeling body, shaky or steady, goes ignored by the God who knits together galaxies and grief with equal care. You're allowed to pray ugly. You're allowed to pray late. You're allowed to pray again and again and again. Because prayer isn't a performance. It's a lifeline, a whisper from earth that echoes in eternity. So wherever you are, sofa, floor, tangled in blankets with your phone 6 inches from your nose, know this, you're already heard, already known, already remembered. Let that settle in your spine. Let that hum beneath your skin like the final chord of a lullaby you almost forgot you knew. Now close your eyes, breathe deep and sleep. You're safe here. The prayers have gone ahead of you. And heaven has already started answering in whispers.